I know, and the students know, this is our container. These are the people that I'm with. This is what we're working through for 8 weeks.
Yep.
And at the end, we have a break and then we can start again.
Hello and welcome to Good Moves, a podcast by Punchpass. On our show, we have wholehearted conversations with fitness and yoga studio owners to learn more about the unique ways they run their business and inspiring ways they live their lives. I'm your host, Claire. I ran a thriving yoga studio for 8 years and have been part of the Punchpass team for almost as long. We have so much to learn from each other. Let's jump right in. All right, welcome to Good Moves. We are here with Mid from Mid Merry Yoga today. Mid, can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, great to be here. So my name is Mid, and that's actually my nickname. I've had that since birth. My real name is Melissa, but Mid Merry has just always stuck, and I love it. So that's what I call myself these days. I'm 42 and I currently live with my husband up in the beautiful central Australian desert. You potentially might know that as Alice Springs, but it's also known by its language Aranda name of Mabuntua. It's really a beautiful place to live. We've lived in the Northern Territory for well over, I can't remember now, 15 years probably. And we love it, yeah. And I teach yoga. At the moment I'm having a break, but yeah, I've taught yoga for about 6 years. Previous to that, I was a zookeeper, park ranger, lots and lots of other things.
Lots of lives.
And yeah, I'm kind of a nature loving girl, love wildlife, love conservation as well. So yeah,
Beautiful.
It's a bit of a short intro.
No, it's a great intro. So you're at a bit of an interesting moment in your teaching at the moment. And I guess in preparation for this, I was looking at what you're doing and reading all of your bits and pieces. I've always kept up with what you do. Mid and I have actually met before. We met at a yoga workshop up in Sydney, which is the first time we sort of crossed paths. Then we both ended up with Punchpass, and here we are. So you're in an interesting spot. The word that comes to mind when I think about you is boundaries, because I think that you are quite good at setting boundaries with yourself and with your students. But I also think that an easy trap to fall into is assuming people with good boundaries were born with good boundaries and just have always had good boundaries, just like when you see someone who's good at yoga and you go, well, of course they're good at yoga because they're good at yoga. Not that anyone's good at yoga, but anyway. So tell me where you're at right now and how you sort of maintain those boundaries in your life.
So yes, you are completely right. I'm in a pretty interesting spot at the moment. So I'm currently taking a break. I'm taking this term off, which is probably about 10 weeks, taking it off teaching. So previous to that, I have taught, basically nonstop apart from taking holidays. And a lot of those holidays were trainings.
Yeah.
When we used to be able to travel in exotic places. And so pretty much, yeah, I worked nonstop 7 days a week. I also had a part-time job at a Whole Foods store. And I'm at the moment now where I am a yoga teacher living with a back injury, which is a fascinating work in progress of patience and letting go and boundaries, as you have said. And so, yeah, it's kind of a weird place to be in where I'm a yoga teacher that's not teaching yoga to students in the studio. And so it was kind of, I guess, towards the end of last year. I think looking back, I probably had a lot of chronic pain for most of last year, even the year before, and, just kept going for my students and out of an expectation of myself. I thought I needed to keep going. And then, my body was just like, yep, you can't stand up anymore.
Wow.
Something's wrong. Yeah. And then, as you would know, and a lot of other probably people that are listening, whether they're yoga teachers or fitness, PTs, where often we work for ourselves and we are our business and we are our sole source of income. And so at the end of last year, the last 3 weeks of term, I had to cancel.
Wow.
And again, like you would know, and other people listening would know, it's a really, really hard, shitty thing to do. When you feel like you've got to let everyone know, sorry, I'm just going to take the rest of the year off.
Did you try teaching?
So that's where I am.
Did you try teaching with less demoing? Did you try teaching with a more verbal? Like, what was the process before you decided I can't do it?
Looking back now, I was actually in pain and I did keep teaching. And I did modify. I didn't let anyone know. I just modified what I would do. So I wouldn't do a lot of the forward folds. I wouldn't do a lot of the hip openers. And then it got to the point where I actually also am part of a community choir up here in Mabantua, and I did a performance. We did 2 performances in one night, and I actually couldn't stand up. And I did stand up, and that was a really bad thing to do.
Yeah.
But I just love singing. And that's kind of when it hit me that like, oh, this is actually really serious.
Yep.
And after that, that's when I took a week off, and then I went, oh, I'm feeling better. I'll try and teach a yin class. And then I taught a yin class thinking, very little movement.
Right.
I did it all against the wall. And then the next day I couldn't walk again.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah, and I am one of those people that I could have maybe sat on a chair and taught yoga.
Because you'd have quite consistent
was
students.
Difficult for me.
So your students would have been quite consistent. You would have had students who could have just listened to your voice and gone, I know what Mid's going to do, and be familiar with your flow and your sequence and all those sort of things.
Yeah, and I think a lot for me was that I was in a lot of pain, and then I wasn't able to think clearly. And I probably teach a little differently, as we all do, from a lot of people, in that I teach for myself. I teach in term yoga lots. Everyone signs up for a term, and each week we have a different theme, but it's held together with an overarching theme. And everything I do, whether it's mantra or mudra or the asana, pranayama, all of it, the words I use, it's all tied into that. And I think because I was in so much pain, like mentally, I wasn't in a headspace to even just sit somewhere and tell people what to do, because to me that wasn't teaching from a place of integrity. Like if you're in pain. Yeah. And so as you've just brought up, that was the beginning of me learning about boundaries.
Yep. Yeah. I think it's really interesting as a teacher when you are carrying a physical injury, or if you're in a mental place that isn't particularly cohesive, or you've been through a trauma or a heartbreak or something like that. When I was a yoga teacher, it was a constant battle of trying to figure out how much of that do you bring to your students? Do you owe it to your students to tell them, look, guys, I'm really flat today, I'm having a bad day? Or do you just push through because you owe them a practice where they're not absorbing the energy from you? It's a really interesting thing to navigate, I think, because I've had teachers on both sides of the spectrum. I've had teachers that have sat down at the start of the class and gone, oh my God, my car broke down and my cat's sick and yada, and I barely slept last night and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and I've had other teachers who've shown up and they're almost the same every time. And there must be things going on in their life, but they show up consistently. And I just think it's a really interesting process we have to go through as yoga teachers. Did you start coming clean during those last few weeks when you were in pain? Was it something that you told your students and let them know?
Yeah, and I did. And I was I've struggled with exactly what you have just said. And even, the past couple of years were really difficult, having to navigate, really quickly going to online classes and having to navigate all of my own stuff and stuff happening with my partner. For those first year and a half, those first 18 months, I was pretty good. I let in that obviously I'm struggling, but once it got to that sort of October-ish last year, I let students know, but I kind of felt I've also got this kind of part of me that is quite private. And so I live in a very small town. Like the desert is a very small town. You cannot go anywhere without seeing at least 10 people. Yeah. Everyone knows everything about you. And so for me, I was just really cautious about what I kind of said and the language that I was using. And so I just said, I'm suffering from a little bit of pain. There's something going on. I'm not quite sure what it is. I already kind of knew it was something to do with my back, and I had a sneaking suspicion it was something to do with my discs, but I didn't let that on. And I've kind of always done that with my students. And I guess, like you've said, I've got a very consistent student base. They were kind of used to that. And there was, no questions. There was nothing other than full support. But I do find that a struggle, like I've been to big city yoga classes, where the teacher comes in and divulges their entire breakup story, and So I have often felt that very overwhelming. And so I'm really cautious of, we are human. So it's really important for our students to understand we're human. But I've got a really great mentor that I work with. And I remember sort of, she was like, you get there early, you do some practices, you settle your own nervous system so that no matter what is or has been going on for you in the previous 3 minutes, you're there for your students. And last year, towards that end of the year, I actually got to the point where I was having quite severe panic attacks or anxiety attacks, 5 minutes before students were walking in.
Oh, wow.
And, at the end of the class, students would say that was the best class you've ever taught.
I was just about to say that. The number of times I've shown up exhausted and devastated about something and gone, I don't know where this is going to come from. And then, you touch on something and I don't even really have the word. I don't even know what I'm trying to say because it's so difficult to explain, I think, what happens in those moments because I've had the same thing happen. Oh, my God, that was the best class ever. And you really just feel like in your own head you're on autopilot and you don't even know what's going to come out next. And, it's like that analogy of the duck, the duck on the top of the water is smooth and calm and underneath the water the little legs are going. I mean, that's how it feels like. I know. And you're like, okay, this worked.
Totally. And so after teaching a little bit like that, I've kind of realized, it's nice to connect with students. And as they walk in, how are you? And be like, oh, it's been a day and a half, but here we are.
Yep.
And so to kind of acknowledge that, but kind of my sort of thing would be like, here we are, like we're here.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that point, I've often felt if I divulge and go right into all the crap dark stuff that's happened that day, it kind of, the class, it takes a lot more of my energy to kind of gather them with me and take them with me. Whereas if I kind of acknowledge, oh God, that was a crap day, in Alice Springs, when one person has had a crap day, it's usually the collective because it's often to do with social justice things that are happening or, there's a big court case happening at the moment and that's been going on for a year and a bit. And so often if one person's had a bad day, everyone would have. And so if I kind of would start the class going, oh God, this has been a day, and just kept going, I would really notice that students would just, their energy and their feeling was very difficult to kind of allow them to settle into the space. So I would acknowledge it and then just kind of go, all right, we're here. We're here to do some work. You might be laying down for the whole 90 minutes. You might be coming with us. And I'd kind of move in that direction. And then they would feel like I've shared a bit of humanity with them. But then I'm kind of there to be that conduit to work through it to the other side.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that kind of ripples out to what we're seeing with COVID at the moment as well, is that it has been a collective trauma. Like you were saying, the whole town feels the same thing. The whole world feels the same thing. So we're all, and no one's available to help. We've all got to help ourselves through practices like yoga because everyone's exhausted and everyone's overwhelmed and everyone's stressed out. And it's really unprecedented, not to use such a terrible cliche, but it is. Normally when we're having a bad day, we can turn to somebody else and maybe they've had a better day and they've been bolstered. But it's such an undercurrent now, I think, of just exhaustion and trauma that is so difficult for us all to overcome. Have you found that people have, obviously before you stopped teaching, was there an element of connection that was more than yoga in your online practice when you had people joining you online? A lot of studios that we've spoken to have found that even 10 minutes before and the 10 minutes after class were just as important as the actual physical practice when we were all in isolation or having a tough time. Is that something that you saw come up in your area too?
A little bit.
Yeah.
My students were quite, I feel, different maybe from others. Like I've practiced, say, with powerlifting or humankind in Adelaide, online.
Yeah.
And I felt it was quite different. And my students often, like beforehand, even though I would always offer, a period of like putting a video on and checking in and chatting, very few of them would actually take that up. So people were really happy to chat in the chat box, but and I have a suspicion that that's probably just to do with the type of work that a lot of my students do. So a lot of my students are in a a really heavy support base industry where they're a social worker, where they work in the prison with young women, and so they are literally on all day, 8, 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of having that online class, they really loved because they could actually turn their screen off and they didn't have to be seen.
Yep.
So that's kind of quite different from kind of what you were saying.
Really different.
And I think, so I think they liked the connection that they could still have with me.
Yeah.
But, and knowing that they could see, 25 other little black squares with the people's names on it, and knowing there were people there, but actually not having to be seen because they'd just been seen all day.
Right.
And so it's actually quite different. Yeah.
It is quite different, but it harks back to when we all were in the studio as well. I always struggled as a studio owner with the pull to get people together as a community. Let's, God forbid, introduce ourselves before class. We never went that far, right? So there's that end of the spectrum where we're all trying to connect everybody. And then the other end of the spectrum, people like me that quite often just want to go in, say a nice friendly hello to the teacher, get on my mat and then bail out at the end of the class, not interested. But then there's the people that are looking for connection that maybe need that facilitated a little bit. And I just find that such a tricky part of the studio running business is making it a friendly, warm place, but not forcing anyone into any interactions that they are not interested in having. And I'm wondering how that works for you and how you feel then being out in the community. Are those borders blurred for you? Do you have any of those boundaries in place for your students? I know that quite often you would resonate with people in your class and you're like, man, we could hang out, but it doesn't really feel right at this point. How does that work for you in such a small town when you're such a prominent figure? And like you said, everyone else is sort of prominent in their own integrated way.
How have I worked that? Look, I still struggle with it, and I think it will potentially always be like that.
Totally.
And it's partly just the nature of living here and the work that we do.
Yep.
And the way that I guess the boundaries that I have in place is that as you would know, as a studio owner, so when people come in, and the place I used to teach at and even where I teach now, there's sort of like a little reception area. And so people can either just kind of breeze on through and wave to me and set up their mat, or they can stay and chat, they can get a chai, they can tell me about their day. And as you would know, sometimes they tell you everything.
They really do.
They really do, right? And it's because you've known them for 4 years and, you've been through a lot with them and they feel really comfortable. They might not necessarily feel safe, but they feel very comfortable talking to you. And so what I have one of the ways, obviously, that I manage that is I let them divulge that, and I sort of just don't get too involved. I let them just say what they need to say. I give them a couple of nice words of comfort, and then I don't kind of engage it because otherwise you start to become almost like the therapy session.
Absolutely.
And I've sort of never had any issues of people sort of keep on going and going.
Yeah.
I've said a few words and those words would lead them to kind of go and find a place on their mat, in a comfortable, gentle way. And then I guess the other way that I cope with that is that of course, like I know all of us will do, is I don't discuss that anywhere else.
Right.
At all. And in this town, it can be really easy to do that because everyone knows everyone. And so there's this weird sense of familiarity that you think, oh, well, they know that person. They know they're talking about the struggles she just told me. Oh, maybe I could tell her that student's actually okay. And I've been really mindful not to do that because, you can be out for a margarita on a Friday night. Yes, I do drink margaritas sometimes when I need. And you'll see someone and they'll be like, oh, did you see such and such? Oh, they're having such a hard time. How are they going at yoga? What do you think is happening for them? And so it's so easy in that situation to feel like you're caring about your student by telling.
Yeah.
And so it's part of the boundaries is me going, there's nothing to say and I won't say anything, I'll just kind of steer the conversation somewhere else.
So that way, I guess everyone feels safe. Yeah.
Yeah. And sort of keeping their personal lives kind of quite safe, even if other people know. I want them to know that if they come to yoga, then it's safe with me, and they're okay to tell that if they need, and it won't go any further.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of a few of the ways.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And you've spent a lot of time building your community. I mean, I can kind of remember in the early days trying to figure out, and again, back to boundaries again, somehow that's just the word, I think, for your episode. I remember when, you were figuring out the term-based side of things and having people commit and having people, it's such a journey, and it's such I think it's a bit of an Australian thing. It's quite common in the Iyengar studios I see. It's a bit of an Aussie thing. I don't see it as much in our other international clients, but that term-based thing just really works well for people in Australia, and it seems to be sort of an accepted way to go. Is that a structure that you're still enjoying? Is that something that you're still happy going with? I mean, I know you've got your themes that weave through and Yeah, I really am, and I switched to terms. It came on quite fortuitously because, as you would know, and for people that, maybe want a little background, the first studio that I kind of taught at, I did teach in Darwin, but in the desert, I actually started teaching within a beautiful art gallery, a boutique art gallery space. And so it was an art gallery by day, and then early morning and evening, it was where I taught yoga. So I was really lucky to come across that. And I taught there kind of continuously for 3 and a bit years. And then kind of March last year, around March, April, the gallery owner was like, oh gosh, things are just getting busier and busier. And it was getting quite difficult for him to be able to get, big deliveries of art and then clean up for my classes. And it was all very amicable. And he's like, when you found a new space, I think it's time maybe, you moved on. And so I went, great, clean break, new space. And then let's just make it all new at once for the students. Yeah, such a great way to do it. I encourage people to do this all the time. If you're making one change, when people switch to Punchpass, I'm like, you're changing to us? Great. Yep. What else do you want to, what else can we do at the same time?
What else do you want to do?
Yeah, because now's the time. Let's go.
Yeah. And that's what I did. And so I just kept the same class days and times, but I just made it into terms.
Yep.
And I probably lost 2 students.
Wow.
That was it.
That's amazing.
And I think the biggest thing for me has been I know who's coming to class.
Yep.
I know that, that will be the income for that term. And then I also know that I can see a break at the end.
Yes.
Because as every yoga teacher, fitness professional, small business owner would know, you work for yourself, you never have a day off, really.
It just keeps going. Yeah.
And you just keep going. And then it's so easy to just burn out and then stop looking after yourself.
Right.
I didn't see my husband because I would teach all weekend, 2 or 3 nights a week. I'd be gone by the time he got home.
Yeah.
And so that the term-based is just for everything in all aspects of my life has given me consistency.
Yep.
That really nice feeling. And it's given me a great boundary. There's the word again. I know, and the students know this is our container. Mm-hmm. These are the people that I'm with. This is what we're working through for 8 weeks.
Yep.
And at the end, we have a break and then we can start again.
And they probably appreciate the break too. I mean, there's something nice about an enforced break. They probably never take 2 weeks off from yoga if it was up to them because they'd feel like they were failing or they were guilty or whatever it is. So to have it given to them is just fantastic. So important. And magical things happen when you take a break, I think. I've come back from breaks and had quote unquote progress, terrible way to think about yoga, but poses going a little bit deeper when I ignored them for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or 2. So are you still letting other people in? Is there still a drop-in element to your classes, or is it just that's it? If you're in, you're in.
Yeah, no, there is, and just because of where I live and the work that people do.
Right.
So at the moment, it's a little bit different, and sort of COVID did mess with this a bit. So a lot of what Alice Springs and Buntua, a lot of what people do here is supporting really remote communities.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of different, health, education, mental health, housing. Everything is really support services for people that live anywhere other than here. And so a lot of what people do is they work out bush.
Right.
And so they will go to a community for a week and come back. Sometimes a lot of my students go out on a Tuesday, come back on a Friday.
Yeah.
And so I've always, when I went to the term-based yoga, I was really aware that even well over half my students might not be able to commit.
Yep.
And so I made five to kind of 6 spaces every class were for drop-ins.
Beautiful.
And that was strictly for people that were shift workers at the hospital, because the hospital shifts change every week. They don't have the same roster, which is really, really
exhausting.
horrible for them.
Yeah.
It's a very odd system here. Yeah, I think every month their roster changes. So for people, the healthcare workers work remote, bush work, it's for those people. Even for mums, a lot of people here are mums, dads, and they don't have family support. And so it's whether they can get babysitting or childcare. So I don't ask questions, but, I request that if you're one of those people, you can book into a drop-in, and those spaces always would go as well. So,
and you found people respect that. So people are really respectful of those spaces and are taking care of them and not abusing the ability to come in and do that. That's fantastic. I think that really reflects on the way that you set them up and the language that you use, because it is, again, one of those tricky things about being a studio owner is the boundaries of, when you're accepting excuses or reasons for people not being able to show up when it affects your business, and you have to just take them at their word sometimes that they're doing their best.
Yeah.
And then going back to the break time that you have for your students, you now have a great video library. I know it's not with us. We don't have to beat around the bush, and that's okay. So you're supporting people with online practices. How's that going for you? Are people taking you up on it, do you think?
Yeah, it was a little bit slow on the kind of uptake, and I think part of that is that people wanted to go back to online, to in-person kind of classes. I think especially at the beginning of this year, they were like, yes, yoga is going to be beginning in February. Oh my gosh, I've been hanging out for it. Yes. And then I'm like, also, by the way, we're not doing yoga till April.
Yeah, that must have been so tough. I just think it's such a ballsy move. I really respect it. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you. It was such a hard decision. And as soon as I made it, this massive weight just dropped off my shoulder. I'm like, God, you should have just made that like at Christmas time instead of stressing about it for 4 friggin' weeks.
And I bet all you got was support too. You would have just got love.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, amazing.
Totally.
Yeah.
All the love came flooding in. Yeah. And so I think, in the beginning, I was like, I was expecting I'm going to get like 200 people sign up.
Yeah. No.
And they were kind of like, I just want to go and do, yoga in person.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, there's quite a few yoga teachers in Alice that have also been taking a break. Some have been on a break for like 6 months. Yeah. And there's quite a few, there's probably 3 that I know of that have been here even longer than me, and they're having quite a substantial break for all various reasons. And although there's a few new yoga teachers coming in, my students are like, I'm going to some classes, but I'm so grateful that you've actually got something online, because I might not be doing the movement stuff, but I'm doing your meditations or your breath work, because it's 10 minutes and I have 10 minutes in my morning to do it. So it's been a bit slower. And, to be honest, a lot of that is also on me, because mid last year, I was obviously feeling in pain, was ignoring it, but was feeling constantly exhausted and kind of very fatigued mentally. And I didn't really know what was wrong. And when I feel like that, my anxiety often goes up and then my consistency goes down, as does my creativity. Yeah. And so I've kind of felt in a bit of a funk, bit of a not quite sure of my direction. Like, I don't just want to be another online on-demand studio with hundreds of classes with no guidance or theme.
Yep.
And so what I'm working through at the moment is having this good break, but also doing a little bit of work on just getting some really clear direction on what I want for that online on-demand space.
Yeah.
Really trying to help my students. And kind of what I've been thinking is, there's lots of these types of spaces, but a lot of it doesn't give people or students a clear direction. And that's often what they need. They come to class and you're there, they feel that energy. But in an online space, they're like, I don't know which class to choose. You've got 200. Which one do I do?
Absolutely.
Do I just do a different one every day?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, how do I make it work? So that's kind of where I am at the moment, is like really kind of honing my focus, my niche.
So more linear online programs where people follow along, much like a beginner's course or something like that.
Something like that. I really don't know at the moment.
It's exciting.
I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah.
Even, a lot of my thoughts of being kind of, maybe there's a membership for where, you can just come on and pick a class, do what you want. But then potentially there's another tier of membership where every week you do a live class with me, and maybe every week you get like a 30-minute session with me, so that you've got some accountability, you've got a reason to show up.
Yeah.
Because as you would know, when there's that accountability, when you show up for someone, you're more likely to show up. You're there for yourself as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it is getting really overwhelming. And I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, because we have people who have, video libraries that are just wild. And it's great to have that choice. I mean, I've done online yoga for a really long time. It's how I found good friend Catherine Budig. I wish she was our good friend.
Yeah.
But
I know we can all wish.
It's a brilliant modality. And I was so resistant initially. I was like, this is, I can't practice yoga online. This is insane. But it is such a beautiful thing to do. But I've done that, you sit down and you start flicking through all the available classes, and 10 minutes, 15 minutes goes by, and it's like, or you start one and you're like, that wasn't it. I didn't want to do that pose, So it's too much. Maybe that's just me. So the idea of it being linear and targeted, I think, just really takes the pressure off, and really just gives you, because when you show up to a yoga class, you do what you're given. I mean, that is what it is. And you're on for, you can rest, or you can take it harder or softer, whatever. But the teacher is teaching what they teach, which I think there's some real beauty in that, because sometimes it hits the spot perfectly and sometimes it doesn't, but it is what it is. So that idea of it being linear, I think, is a great idea. So when you return next term, are you in person? So you've got the new studio space now. Is that what's going on? Is that a collective or is that just you?
It's a shared space. So it's a purpose-built, used to be an old tin shed. Lots of things in the desert, they're just tin sheds.
Yeah.
And then people kind of renovate them and make them beautiful. So it's not an art gallery. I do miss the beautiful
You could put some things on the wall.
I mean, we could, yes. It's a beautiful space that is very much like a city yoga studio. Gorgeous. So obviously in the art gallery, we had cement floors. It was very industrial, which was great. Couldn't use the walls. This space there's about 3 other teachers that use it through the week.
Yep.
Which is interesting. It can be like living in a share house.
So you're all doing your own thing. So they're all independent businesses.
Yep. Cool. But the space is gorgeous. It's got bamboo floorboards. It's got beautiful walls. There's even ropes, because there's an Iyengar class. My students all freaked out. They walked in, they're like,
what is going on?
What are the ropes on the wall for? And I was like, oh, well, that's what we do now. And they were like, I'm joking. It's fine.
It's an Iyengar thing.
It's an Iyengar thing. And, it's beautiful, big vaulted ceilings.
Oh, my God.
Gorgeous windows. It is next to a massive, industrial plumbing workshop, which is quite fun at 6 a.m. when all the plumbers arrive.
But I like that. I love the idea of doing yoga in the middle of the chaos. I mean, I think about India and, chaos. And then, if we were in a beautiful white quiet room that smelled of lavender, we would never be challenged. We would never have to, you've got to rise above the plumbers.
Exactly. So that space is beautiful, and the students are really loving it, because so many of them love legs up the wall.
Yeah.
and so at the end of class, so many of them just go, I'm just going to the wall, wake me in 10 minutes.
That's awesome.
Which is really lovely. And so, it's a shared space. The people have been fantastic that own it. They've built me, an incredible prop storage area.
Awesome.
Yeah, and so there's 3 kind of main teachers that use it, and then it does get rented out. It's a bit of a community space, and it does get rented out to, full moon circles or cacao ceremonies, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And I adore it. I really love it, but I do, I do kind of really kind of crave that space where I can put art up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I can leave. I've got a little desk that I roll out that's got all my stuff on it. And I serve chai, and I have like rose petals and cinnamon that people put on their chai. And so all of my stuff kind of goes away and then I pull it all out. So I love the space. It's got a really beautiful energy because it's had yoga practiced in it for probably 20 years. So it's got a really glorious.
So it has that history behind it.
It's got a glorious feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
But just craving that space that is, I guess, mine, but someone else's, as when you work by yourself, you kind of like, I'd like a team.
Yeah.
Where's the team?
You went down that road for a while.
Else.
You've had a team before.
Yeah. There was one of my friends, she started her yoga teaching journey and she was teaching restorative yoga as a community class. And we've still got our dream. We still have coffee and chai and dream about it. We're like, we just need a rich benefactor to support us.
Not happened yet?
Not happened yet.
No.
Yeah, but there's things kind of in the works. Like I've been chatting to a friend here. She's an OT, and we've been sort of thinking about getting a shared space. And it's COVID, and things are a little bit tough at the moment. But we've still got those dreams. But for now, when I go back in April, it'll be at that space.
Yeah.
And it's really lovely. I've had feedback of students that have gone to other classes there because I'm like, hey, just because I'm not teaching, if you want an in-person class, here's a great restorative class you can go to, support other people. And they've gone and they're like, oh, but there's no chai. There's no music, and you choose the best music. Aww. And I'm like, I love my stupid.
Sometimes you have to, you don't know what you've got until you try something else. But it's so true. Yeah. And it's not, when you find your person and your teacher, it's that. There's other yoga, but it's not the same kind of yoga.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you. I'm really just inspired. If I still had a studio, I'd be inspired by but that's okay. Yeah, I just think it's brilliant. I just think what you're doing, taking a break, is fantastic. And are you feeling better? Is it getting better?
I am. You would have seen, like, I think I did a post yesterday, the day before.
Yeah.
All rolls into one. I just about really coming to like terms with the fact that I don't know why we find it, especially as teachers, so hard, as you would know very well. Healing is not linear.
No.
And I had to speak to one of my teachers about it. And she was like, mid. Like, I've had the same thing mid, and it's going to be really shit. Then it will be great. Then it will be crap again.
Yeah.
And it'll be great. And then it'll be shit again. And then you'll come out one day and
realize,
just be like, oh, my nervous system feels okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it hasn't hurt in 3 months, and you just, haven't paid attention. Yeah. I'm nervous system above everything else for 2022, I think, is my little mantra. It's like, if it's not good for the old central nervous system, it's out, which sounds like sort of a similar path to what you're going down to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was getting really, really annoyed and angry. Which is not a good place for a yoga teacher to be.
But you're a human being too.
This is right. Yeah. And because I was doing all the right things.
Yeah.
And then not getting any better, and then getting worse.
Yeah.
And it was, and you can go to so many different health professionals, and I got told so many different things, as you would have similar experience. And I just got more and more frustrated. And then, eventually I got in to see my usual GP, which he'd been away, and I had been to and from other people. And he was like, gosh, why haven't we got you a scan already? Like, let's just get you in. Let's just get you sorted. And then within a day, I had the results. And even just knowing that, even though I'm really aware that you could scan 100 people and, 60 of them would have, disc issues.
Yeah.
As like one of my practitioners told me, she was like, yeah, but when you've got pain, you do have pain. That's whether, we know that pain's an output from the brain, not the tissues, but it doesn't mean it's not real. And it doesn't mean, you're not allowed to feel it.
Absolutely.
And so, having that kind of after being told that a lot of it was either in my head or to just kind of get over it.
Yeah.
Having that diagnosis and then knowing what I felt was real, and then speaking to a few other teachers that have gone through very similar things and going, you know what, it's just like life. It's an ebb and flow.
Yeah.
And the most important thing that I can do is take care of my nervous system.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it comes down to, I think. Definitely the theme for the year around here. Well, I wish you all the best. Thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to catch up with you again. I can't wait to see your announcement that you're back on the mat and back in the studio, unless, of course, you need more rest, in which case I will be excited to see that announcement too. Thank you so much, Mid.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claire. It's been so wonderful.
If you'd like to learn more about any of the guests that we've featured on the show or about Punchpass, you can head to our website at punchpass.com.